Today, I am sitting down with Thirzah, who is the first ever apprentice graduate of the company, and we are here to talk about her book, A Traitor's Vow, which is the exciting sequel to her first book, The Librarian's Ruse. So, thank you for joining us today. My name is Brad Paquette, and this is the Company Podcast. Well, Thirzah, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Brad.
And so, unlike some of the authors that I talk to, we have worked together a lot. So you spent 2 years here in Eastern Ohio with us, learning all about writing and publishing and growing in your faith and things like that. Just bring us up to speed. What's going on? Where have you been for the past year since you graduated?
That's a great question. I've been kind of all over the place. I ended up going to the Netherlands for a little bit, did some traveling, went to, I think it was Tennessee, somewhere around there. Yeah, I've been all sorts of places, and now I'm finally back home in uh, Maryland, so it feels good to be back.
Well, and Netherlands is kind of home, right? Isn't that kind of like going back home for you?
In a way, yeah. I was born there, but a lot of things have changed since I was little, and a lot of things are just different from America. Like, for instance, we had to move out of move a bunch of stuff out of my grandfather's house, and when we say move, it's move everything. So you can't keep the flooring, you can't keep
What?
any of the appliances, you can't even keep the light fixtures. Like, everything has to go.
And that's like a normal rental thing in the Netherlands. It's
Yeah.
like you take your own flooring with you.
Yeah, rental and house too, unless you want to leave the stuff behind and the other person is okay with that. For the most part, you just pack everything up.
That's crazy. And so you guys had to, and you were just completely cleaning out the apartment. So you had to do all of that. And do you speak Dutch?
In Becha,
Excuse me,
a
Kazundai.
little bit.
Okay. All right, cool. And so you've had like all this stuff going on, which was unexpected for you, I'm sure, as you were also trying to launch your writing career after graduating from here. But nonetheless, you powered through, you pushed through, and I'd love to hear if you have any tips on that. But you pushed through and you released A Traitor's Vow. So let's talk about that first. So this is the second book in your Adventures in Eldnaire series. So you wrote the first one while you were a student here at the company, and we published it sort of as you were on your way out the door graduating. But now you've written the second book by yourself. So tell us about it.
Okay, so A Trader's Vow has undergone so many changes since it was first thought up in my mind. Um, as you said, it's the continuation of the series and the continuation of Amelia's journey as a false ambassador. And it was really interesting working on this book because of everything that was going on in my life at the time, and it really was hard to get this book written. And once it was actually written, it was nowhere near finished, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me, Tirza, uh, since I was involved in the process. But one of the things, if I may say, is one of the things I like about your books is that I can pronounce all the names. You know, so I get that it's like it's a convention of the fantasy genre to have weird names, but you've really done a good job of kind of splitting the difference, and you have these names that are not like super normal names, but at the same time, I can actually figure out how to pronounce them. So thank you for that.
See, not everyone agrees though, because even some people in my family, they were saying Kyvir or Kiver, and I was like, actually, it's Kavir.
Well, it made perfect sense to me. So
Oh, good.
actually, anybody that wants to pick up A Trader's Vow, it's available on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, places like that. It's both a paperback and an ebook. So you can check it out and you can let us know. You can send Tears an email or drop a comment on her website if you think the names are pronounceable enough for you. But so you've been getting into this, and you released the book just a couple of weeks ago at the time that we're recording this. What kind of responses are you getting to the book so far?
So that's a great question because I was actually kind of like wondering how this was going to go because this book turned out a lot differently from like how I expected and how I thought everybody else was expecting it to go. But so far, I've feel like I've actually had a better reception to the second book than I did to the first.
That's really interesting, and it is really different, right, with the second book, because the first book you have a lot of friends and family support.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think, and maybe your friends and family are great, but I think a lot of people experience that kind of drops off a little bit with the second book. But hopefully you have some platform that kind of rolls its way off of the first book into the second book. So, what has been your experience in that regard?
Things have definitely been a little bit different because some of the people that I had on my launch team last year weren't able to do it this year because of other things that they had to do. Or there was actually some new people that joined my team this year, which was also pretty exciting. But yeah, for the most part, it's been the same but also different.
Okay, all right. So, what's one lesson that you learned with the first book that you tried to apply in the way that you released it to the second one?
Ooh, so in the first book that I published, I was really afraid of trusting the opinions of the people who were on my launch team or who were just reviewing my book in general. If I knew that person at all, then I didn't trust their judgment. I didn't believe that what they were saying was actually true because obviously they were just trying to make me feel better if they said anything positive. But I've learned that that's a really terrible way to approach your team because they're your team for a reason. Like I wouldn't have asked these people to join my team or like to read my book even if I didn't trust their opinions. And so if I trust them, then I need to actually believe them when they say whatever they say, whether it's good or bad.
That's such a good point. And also, like at the time you release the book, take all the positivity you can get, right? Like you can't change it. You can't, there's no way to go back and change the book at this point. I mean, I suppose you could, but that'd be very awkward and weird. So it is what it is. So at this point, like I once heard, I was in a writer's workshop and somebody gave me this analogy. She was talking about how she was on campus one day and she saw a sticker on the back of somebody's jeans. You know, like you wear a new pair of jeans and you forget to take the sticker off, right? And she decided that because it was like 8 a.m. and it was probably like his first class, she told him about it so she could take the sticker off. But if it had been like 4 p.m. and he was on his way home, she wouldn't have said anything, right? And she would have just let
Oh.
it ride because it can't be changed anymore. And it's almost the same situation with your book, right? Like, and I'm not ever a proponent of like lying to each other or anything like that, but I always like when somebody asks me for feedback, that's part of the matrix that runs through my mind is like, can they apply what I'm saying, or is it best just to like support them at this point? So we
Hmm.
have to receive that to some degree too, right?
That's true for sure.
Well, and so tell us, you mentioned your launch team, but like, who is this book really for? Who's the perfect reader for this book?
So I originally created this book and all of my Adventures in Eldnaire series books, the other one, the Librarian's Ruse, for teens that are about 12 to 16 years old. And the reason I did that was because when I was around that age, I was having such like trouble finding books that were mother approved but were still interesting.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I know, we have our oldest son is 14 now, and it is just like a constant struggle. I think it might even be worse for boys than girls, honestly.
Oh, I
But
wouldn't be surprised.
there's this gap, right, of people that are in such a vulnerable time of your life when it's hard to find things that are really good to read and also edifying. So, and I know from the first book that you got a ton of feedback from people in that age group, and it sounds to me, I don't think they are wise enough even to puff you up, right? So you can trust that feedback, and it sounds like you really hit the target with the first book.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was actually a little surprised because I got more, like I was expecting to get more people in my target audience than I at first did. Like at first it was people from the ages of like 11 to 70. So I
Right.
was a little confused there, but yeah, it did eventually find its target audience, and a lot of these girls really enjoyed the book.
That's awesome. And so what kind of stuff like you're like, oh, if you're into this type of book, you will love The Librarian's Ruse and A Traitor's Vow. What are some of the tropes, is what I'm asking you, but I don't want to use the word tropes since that's a turn off for some readers. But what are some of the tropes that you've included here that people would like?
So wait, in the librarian's ruse or in a trader's vow?
I guess mostly a Traitor's Vow, but they're very
Okay.
similar, right, in that
Yeah,
regard. But
that's
let's stick
true.
with the Traitor's Vow. Yeah.
Okay, in A Traitor's Vow, there is a lot of unlikely friendships that are on view, I'd say. We have, yeah, I'd say unlikely friendships is a big one. There's the whole mercenaries, spies, and assassins type thing. And from the title, you can know that there's like some traitors involved, but
Hmm.
I won't say too much about that because spoilers.
Yeah, sure. And we've kind of classified this as a fantasy book, but it's not heavy in fantasy, right? Like there's no magic that I can think of. There's no dragons at this point in the story.
Yeah,
Not in
no,
this draft, right?
yeah, not in this draft. Yeah, that's a fun fact.
What about in the third book? Do you think you'll move more into some of those kind of conventional fantasy elements, or will it stay that kind of like fantasy light Regency kind of space?
See, in this particular series, the fantasy is there. It's just you don't see very much of it. I feel like
Okay.
if I were to explore this world more, you would see more of the fantastical elements. But with this series, it makes more sense for me to focus on the human slash real aspect of the world.
Okay, gotcha. So there is like some magic stuff like hanging out in the universe of the story. It's just not relevant to the story right now.
For sure.
Okay. All right. And so the third book, do you think it'll be the same sort of more character driven than universe driven?
It's definitely pretty character driven. Um, at least what I'm writing right now, because what I've learned is that a book can go through a complete 180 even after you've finished it. So I'm hesitant to say exactly what to expect from this third book. But from what I'm writing right now, it is definitely more character driven. And while you do get to see a lot more world building, it's more focused world building.
Okay. Is there freedom in that? Like, so you're growing as a writer and gaining experience, and that's awesome. I love that so much. But as you've kind of like seen that now, because and of course we worked together for the second book, so I know what you're talking about, right? I saw the
Mm-hmm.
previous draft, and we worked together to come to what it is now. But is how does that tell me your like emotional experience with that? Is there any freedom in knowing that hey, it really doesn't matter as much because it could all change anyways, or does it feel like you might get your life turned upside down?
Um, that's a good question. And honestly, I'd say that it depends on what's going on in the rest of my life at the time. Because if I'm
Hmm.
feeling good in my life, then, oh, hey, things are going to change. Oh, well, that's fine. But if I'm also just experiencing like a lack of control in my own life or like something's going on and I'm like freaking out about that, then anything that happens in my writing life, I'm also probably going to freak out about because it's change and change is scary.
Wow, yeah, that's such a good point. Well, and so as you gain that experience, just as a writer, as a person who's published now twice, what's one tip that you would share with, somebody that's you 2.5, 3 years ago, right? When you were 17 and you were first coming to the company, you just graduated high school, like somebody that's in that position, what's the one thing that you could share with them to help them along in their journey?
So, first of all, don't be afraid to fail. And then, second, when you do fail, and that's when you do fail, don't be afraid to fix it. Because that's the thing. Like, once you fail, you might be like super scared of trying to do anything after that because you feel like you're just going to make things worse. But the thing is, even if you do make things worse, eventually it's going to get better.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. So how did you learn that particular lesson?
By failing and actually fixing it.
Yeah, do you care to share the story?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, with A Traitor's Vow, I wrote this story and I didn't like it at all. But I wasn't quite sure why I didn't like it for the longest time. And then I sent it in to be developmentally edited. And once I got it back, I realized exactly why I didn't like it. And I also learned that I had to basically rewrite half of the book. Like, I think I was at around 30,000 words in the first draft. And when I went to go edit it, I actually had to delete around 15,000. Wait, no, was it 15,000 words? I think, yeah, actually more than 15,000 words. Like I was down to 12,000 words, and I was freaking out. And so I really had to come to grips with that, and I had to push forward and basically replan the story almost from scratch. And I managed to get that word count back up to around 30,000 words, but it was not easy at all. And yeah, it was a terrible experience at the time. Now I can look back and I can laugh at it. But yeah.
Yeah, well, you handled it with aplomb, and and I agree. You know, the thing is, like the second, or we might be onto the third draft. Draft is such a weird word to use at this point, right? Like it comes from the days of like where you'd actually retype things on a typewriter from start to finish. So it's kind of a weird word to use. But like we're
True.
on maybe the third major revision of the book by the time it came to print, right? And
Right.
it is such a better story though. So it paid off. So I'm really glad that you persevered through that. And it's like we say sometimes, like the first draft is just you telling yourself the story, right? There was no way to get to what it is today without that first draft that kind of needed some work, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So hopefully you've learned even more though, and the third draft won't require as major of an overhaul before it goes to publication, right?
I actually feel pretty good about this draft so far. Like, I'm sure that
Awesome.
could change, but so far I'm actually pretty happy with it, which is a big difference from the second book. So, we're doing
For
good.
sure. All right, good, good. And the second book ends on kind of a cliffhanger, which was a bold decision. Have you gotten any feedback on that?
So, I
I mean, I
did.
said kind of a cliffhanger, but I mean like you dangling by a thread over an
Uh,
abyss is what it is. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I was really, really, really nervous about that. I was kind of scared that people were going to be like, excuse me, what? Why?" And then like leave like a bunch of like angry reviews or comments and just be like, "How dare?" But I was pleasantly surprised. There was only one person who was like, "Yeah, I don't think readers are going to like this at all." And so I was like, "Oh!" And that was the first person who talked to me, though. So that was before the book even released, and I was a little scared. But then the book did release, and everybody was just like, "Man, I can't wait for the third book," instead of, "Man, how dare you do this to me?" Except for my own father. My father was kind of heartbroken over the cliffhanger ending. So he's been checking in on me like almost every day, asking, "Hey, when's the third book coming out? When's the third book coming out?" So
That's good. That's good because you need that, right?
I
And
do.
and if I'm going to put you on the spot, I'm going to tell the story. So, in one round of revisions, you sent it to us here at the company to do the developmental edit, and somehow the last chapter didn't get included, right?
Yeah.
Is this embarrassing? Uh,
I mean, yes, but also no. It's kind of funny now.
okay, so it didn't get included, and we just went with it, like, because yeah, I mean, we just edit the manuscript that we get, right?
Hmm.
And then we talked after it was done, and you said, "Does it work?" And my question to you was, that depends on how quickly you're going to get the third book out, right?
Yes.
So now that I have you on the spot, how quickly are you going to get the third book out for those people that really
Oof.
need to know what happens now?
So currently, my plan is to get this book out at the beginning of this next year. So between between January and March, that's when I'm planning to like get this book published.
Okay, so we can solidly say winter
Yes,
2025.
winter
All your
2025.
all right, all your dreams can come true. You can finish the story of Amelia and Leon. And that is like that will complete the story, right? That you're only planning
Yeah,
3 books.
that is my current plan. Like maybe down the line if people really 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 want to know, but for now this is going to be the end of this chapter in Eldnaire.
Okay. And do you think, you mentioned earlier that there's like some magic and stuff in Eldnaire that we haven't even experienced in these books because they're not it's not relevant. Do you think you would ever write other stories in the universe of Eldnaire?
Oh, definitely. I actually already have one that is written.
Okay, awesome. Do you want to? Yeah, and you don't have to because I know sometimes these things require sensitivity. But do you want to tell us about it?
I can tell you a little bit. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
So
awesome.
right now it's a work in progress. It is a desert fantasy novel, but it's set in the same world as Amelia and Leon's story. But yeah, it takes place in the desert region, and it follows a mercenary protagonist, which is a little bit different, seeing as in the Adventures in Eldnaire series, Amelia does not have a very high opinion of mercenaries, so it's kind of fun to like switch that and tell a story from the point of view of a mercenary. And yeah, there's giant scorpions, so that's always fun. Um, yeah, it's going to be a wild ride for sure. It's a little bit different from this book. I feel like the age range is a little bit older than this series, but it's a fun story so far.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that, and I'm sure even though the age range is older, knowing you, I'm sure it's still a very clean read, right? You know, I would surprise me very much if you were pushing those boundaries, but you can answer truthfully.
There's a few boundaries that are pushed, mostly in the violence point of view. Language is still mostly pretty clean, but yeah, there's some violence in there that I was not expecting to be writing.
Okay, yeah, very cool. Um, awesome. And so, one thing with a book like this, and I think this is the last question that I'll pose to you, but I didn't prepare you for it. So,
Oh
is that
dear.
okay? You ready for it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you're a Christian, and that makes you a Christian writer, right? I think sometimes people pick up a book like The Librarian's Ruse or A Traitor's Vow, and they're like, well, it's not really Christian, right?
Mm.
Like you don't talk about Jesus. There's no miracles, stuff like that. So I don't know what. How do you respond to somebody like that? I mean, are these Christian books?
So I'd say that as long as the books like that I write don't go against what God says, like there are themes in there that you would find in the Bible. Like in my books, hope is a huge theme. Um, like there's always hope. That's kind of like the underlying message that you'll find in like both of the books that are out right now and the third book once it comes out. Um, I'd say that yeah, as long as there is those elements, the things that would show up in the Bible, there's still some Christian in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think it's just a little bit different perspective, right? We in the past we segregate books into Christian and secular, right?
Yeah.
But it's like these are Christian value books, but they're not Christian books in the same way that The Shack is, or other popular books, right?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I think that that's a very fair answer, Tirza. So, you've been graduated for a year. You're still building your platform, continuing to develop that. So, tell people about that. If they want to connect with you, what do they do? Why should they do that? That sort of thing.
Absolutely. So you can find me on my website at tearsofrights.com. On there, I post a lot of articles about my journey as a writer or some tips, things that I've learned. And if you follow me on Instagram, you can find a plethora of things, including writing or reading memes, of more things that are following my journey, some cool fantasy photos and stuff like that. I like to do a lot of photo shoots, so that's a lot of fun. You can find me on Pinterest if you like writing prompts. I post writing prompts a lot. I have over 1,000 on there, so be sure to check that out. And yeah, that's that's about most of it. And again, if you want to find my books, they are on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, and yeah, I think that's most of it.
All right, cool. And will you spell your name for folks that maybe this is the first introduction to you? How do you spell Tirza?
So Thirzah is spelled Thirzah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tirsa. As always, it's been a pleasure to talk with you and a pleasure to introduce you to our audience and I hope new audience since the last time you've been on. But we'll of course include in the show notes links to other stuff that Tirsa has done, as well as links to a Traitor's Vow. But I can't encourage you enough to go to Amazon, pick up a copy, check it out, and especially if you have young readers in your life, like Tirza was saying, like readers between like 12 and 17 years of age, it really does hit the mark. And so I encourage you to check that out, pass that along. Christmas is coming up; it'd be a great gift, and it is a clean read. And I think you can trust Tirza to give you a clean read, for your kids or whoever might be picking that up. So Tirza, thank you so much for joining us today. We just bless your writing journey, and we look forward to the third book. So you have all of our best as you move forward with that. Thank you for joining us for the Company Podcast today. I hope that you've enjoyed meeting Tirza and hanging out with her for a few minutes. Make sure that you like and subscribe wherever you listen. And until we see you next time, happy writing and be blessed.
Thank you so much for listening today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and leave us a review. This podcast was produced by Theo Paquette with help from the company. For help with your podcast, visit writers.company. We'd love to give you a hand.